We got a really nice Apex 10 here. John, you up for helping us set up the powder measure?
We got this. Yeah.
Gavin, you here from UltimateReloader.com. I'm back with John Vlieger from Mark 7. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Gavin.
Yeah, we're filming a whole bunch of videos about the Apex 10 and the auto drive. This time we're going to talk about the powder measure. You've got the powder measure installed on your machine. You've got the right components in the powder measure, how to get everything dialed in terms of the height for the actuation and the powder charge. But before we do that, do you mind giving us a brief overview of this specific powder measure?
Sure. So this is our universal mechanical powder measure. It's currently set up for pistol. Now what the pistol aspect of that means is we are using a pistol funnel. We have our pistol drum, which is okay up to about 15, 20 grains of powder with its appropriate stem, adjustment stem here. And if we were to change this over to rifle, it would be as simple as the appropriate funnel. If we're loading .223, we'd use a 22 caliber funnel versus 30 cal or 6 millimeter. And we would change out the drum. We do have bearings on both sides to give it a nice smooth actuation. And the biggest change from our previous generations of powder measures is we have a spring compliance built into it. In previous gens, there was the concern that you could lower that powder measure too much and you would potentially cause damage to the linkages, or basically bad stuff happens. We don't want that. So we added a safety feature in there to make it harder to damage your equipment and to set it up correctly. Makes it overall an easier process.
Yeah, so if you were set up for 40 and a 10 case goes through, you know, you've got some extra length there.
Exactly.
Boom, it bounces up against that kind of thing. So we've got a rotating drum. We've got an integrated baffle. We've also got the screen that acts like kind of a filter in case you have debris.
It's more, yeah, it's a filter. It's more to keep you from making a boo-boo. No, I mean, seriously, you're filling your Mr. Bullet feeder up top. You have the cap off because you were filling powder. You drop a bullet down in your powder. You're now fishing that out if you even notice you did it. You drop primers in there. I mean, debris, stuff from the ceiling, what have you. The cap does a lot of work, but having that screen there is going to prevent stuff from getting in your powder whether you know it or not.
Yeah, that makes sense with the bullet feeder right there.
So the baffle is in there to keep the level of powder, make sure we don't have too much weight on the stack and prevent the cavity from filling. But overall, we really like this powder measure. It's pretty easy to set too if you read the manual.
All right, well, let's see it.
Yeah, all right. So one of the first things we're going to do is set the height. I don't care about the actual charge we're dropping just yet. I'm going to take a prepped case. So in this case, it's primed. You can use a dead primer as well. We're put it underneath.
Something to hold the powder in.
Correct.
Case.
Don't want it leaking out. So we're just going to move to bottom. If you're hand operating, you're just going to run it down by hand. Okay, we're pretty close. Now, if you notice, we're not making O-ring contact yet.
Okay.
The stem is not all the way up making contact with the housing. That means it's not throwing the whole way. We might run the risk of a light charge. So we're going to fix that by running our die body down a little bit further. I've already loosened my set screw here. Let's see if it lets me do it under tension. There we go. We see that stem moving up. We make contact. And now this is where the spring compliance comes into play. I can do a very simple test here to make sure I've not gone too far. I'm just going to pull down and make sure I have some travel left.
Let me try that. Oh, yeah. Okay.
So the spring compliance built in, that's the safety mechanism we talked about. So I'm going to go just a bit further though, just to accommodate, mixed brass and etc.
Sure.
Once again, we can test. Yeah, good to go there. I can now lock my lock nut down, snug it up. And we have the powder measure facing this way for ease of filming. During operation, you would just rotate this so the stem is towards the center of the tool head and you don't have that stem flopping around and potentially catching on a cable or something like that. Yeah. But for this purpose, I'm just going to lock this set screw down, just snug it up. Make sure it doesn't rotate. Okay, that's locked in place. So now that's it. We just set the height.
Okay.
So regardless of caliber, that's your setting, that's your test. Do I still have a little bit of spring play at the top of the stroke? It's going to prevent damage to my mechanism. Now we're going to move on to setting the actual powder charge.
Sounds
So
good.
things to consider before you move on to this though, is if you just filled that powder measure with powder, that's not compacted yet. It's not filtered all the way down past the baffle and giving you a consistent fill of the cavity. So if you are filling it for the first time, you might want to just give it some taps. Let the machine run for a while maybe, let it settle down and fill that void so you're getting a consistent fill.
Yeah.
Along with that, depending on how much powder you plan to drop, you may have to play with your top and bottom dwells.
Okay.
The more powder you're dropping, the more time it takes for that cavity to fill, the more time it takes for that powder to fall into the case. And we can account for that on our tablet, on the fly. And if you're hand operating, you just plan to have a dwell. Bottom of the stroke, give it a little pause, and move up. Try to keep it as consistent as possible. Garbage in, garbage out. You put some quality and some thought into what you're doing, you're going to get some great results.
Yeah, if you have a high capacity 22 caliber bottleneck cartridge, for instance, you're going to want a little extra dwell, right? That
Correct.
22 GT maybe or something like that. A lot of powder to go through a small orifice. 300 blackout on the other case, you've got modest, charge, and you've got a huge 30 cal case neck, so it might take a little bit less time.
If you're loading a 300 blackout subsonics, you can use a pistol drum.
Yeah,
just change your funnel.
Yeah,
you're loading 10, 13 grains of powder.
Yep.
So let's move on to adjusting it. Our adjustment stem here threads in and out. If we want to reduce our charge, we're going to make that cavity smaller. We're going to thread it in. If we want to increase our charge, go the opposite direction.
Nice.
So we have been playing with this morning, so let's just snug that down, end the cycle, and see what powder charge we just dropped. And something I forgot to do, so we're just going to get reset,
do a zero out.
Is zero out in our scale and zero it with our primed case.
It's okay. You need to run quite a few charges through to get that consistent charge level anyways, right?
Exactly. And if you just came in to your powder measure after a long weekend, drop the first few charges. It's been sitting in there settling over the weekend.
Yep.
It doesn't cost you anything. Dump it out, throw it back in the hopper, and then do your checks. So we just zeroed with a primed case. Let's do a real cycle under the same conditions we're going to be operating at ideally. You do a brake job in your car. You don't test it at 5 miles an hour. You work up and you test it at 45, 60 miles an hour. Make sure you did a good job. Same thing with our powder. So I'm going to set this to 2,000 rounds per hour with appropriate dwells. Let's do a single cycle. Give it that pause. Make sure it has stopped before we stick our hand in the machine. And we are sitting at 5.0. Where are we headed today?
6.0.
6.0. Okay, so we're going to thread that insert out. 2, 3, 4. Using my calibrated.
Let's call that 5.9 to 6.1. If we're in that window, we're good.
So I just made a change. I'm going to ignore this powder drop
Yep.
because it didn't refill naturally. Now we can get a real test. .6, almost there. Once again, disregard this powder charge. .61, so we're right in that range. Let's drop a second one to verify. Yeah, we're sitting at 5.9. You good with 5.9?
I'm good with 5.9.
Great. And once we got our setting, the most important part, lock that adjustment down.
Okay. Sounds like a good plan.
And the last thing to keep in mind here on the settings, you do have an upper level of flats. That secures the entire stem and the powder measure.
Yep.
Leave that one alone.
Right.
We're just playing with this lock nut down here, the smaller set of flats, adjustable wrench, and we're just going to snug it up.
That'll keep that locked in, huh?
Yes, sir. And that's really all there is to it. The biggest deal with powder measures are using a powder that flows well, fills a volume, consistently. If you're using really big extruded log, you're not going to have a great time. I mean, it's just the truth of it. It doesn't fill a volume consistently. So using a flake powder or a spherical powder is going to give you the best results, the most consistency, and keep those numbers real close together on the chronograph.
Well, the good news is we've had a proliferation of high-performance powders that are, for instance, ball powders, Stay Ball 6.5, for instance, instead of H4350. So sometimes it's a matter of taking the right product, matching it to the right machine, the right application, and finding that sweet spot.
Yes, sir.
Well, thank you, John, for showing us how to get this dialed in. We've got a bunch of other videos that we're filming regards to the Apex 10, how to convert calibers from one to another, how to set up the machine, maintenance. You're going to want to check out all those videos. That concludes this video, and that means it's time to wrap it up. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. Also, make your voice heard. If you have something to say, please drop a comment. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications because you're not going to want to miss the awesome content that is coming up. And finally, flex your reloading pride. You could look great in one of these t-shirts. We've got multiple designs at the Ultimate Reloader store. I'll see you later because I'm off to go shooting.